This is Aunt Mary. No, this is not Aunt Mary. This is our Zink. And I have a story here about the last years of Aunt Mary's life. Aunt Mary's love for her farm and farm life was reflected in her attachment to her animals and extended even to her care of machinery. Her team of Belgians were bedded in clean straw daily, groomed often, and perhaps fed too much. They were retired early when tractors appeared on the scene and roamed an expansive pasture freely the last 10 years of their lives. Their sheer size was intimidating, their demeanor quite the opposite. I could not have been more than 3 or 4 when Aunt Mary hoisted me onto Kit's broad back for a ride and told to hold tight to his neck. Halter in hand, she proceeded to lead the beast across the yard, but was brought up with a jerk when he abruptly stopped. Arms encircling his neck, legs spread wide across a giant barrel, I had merely rotated down his side, hanging onto his neck until the last second. Aunt Mary turned around to see me lying there between those massive hooves, Kit, immovable as concrete, placidly swishing flies and chewing his cud. The tractor that succeeded Kit and Jeb was very shortly nicknamed the Gold by my father. A little 30-horsepower Fordson. It was washed down after every use, lubed daily, kept inside, and even covered with a blanket in winter. So it would start easier, Aunt Mary said. The tractor was never run higher than 3rd gear, even on the county road in front of the farm. Raised by thrifty Germans, Aunt Mary was the ultimate recycler. Scraps went to the chickens or hogs. Packaging went into the wood cook stove. The outhouse was stocked with a Sears Roebuck catalog for visitors, a pail of corn cobs for family. Rough as a cob was a metaphor that held special meaning for me. When a college roommate, urban raised, used the phrase, I asked him if he knew the context. He did not. Nor did he believe me when I explained it to him. Aunt Mary's diet has never become an accepted health fad. Breakfast was usually 2 cups of very black, often reheated coffee. Into each cup, she'd ladled 4 heaping teaspoons of refined sugar. This was swished about, the liquid drained off at a draught, and the remaining contents scraped up with a spoon. Lips smacking, the 2nd cup was consumed in the same perfunctory manner. Sometimes an egg or a piece of toast smothered in jam would be added, but the coffee usually sufficed for her morning calories. Mid-morning coffee break included no coffee. Coming up from the fields, she would instead pour herself a tumbler, about a pint, of homemade red wine and drain it at 1 tipple. I don't believe she ever drank anything she didn't chug. Dinner, we call it lunch now, would be a pork chop or slab of ham, cold and covered in grease, sometimes wrapped in a slice of bread. The glass of water or milk that accompanied it was probably the healthiest thing she had all day. Supper, we call it dinner now, would be Uncle Ferd's job, hot, and the meat might be accompanied by a vegetable, usually potatoes and cabbage, turnips, or carrots, if Uncle Ferd was sober. He was often not toward the end, so the cast iron skillet in the pantry, which held the pork buried in grease, was the usual backup. Covered in lard, that cooked pork could be safely, if not preferentially, eaten for several days. We took Aunt Mary to the doctor when we suspected she needed to go. She only drove herself to the doctor twice. The first time was because the tractor ran over her chest. She had stopped while plowing, was dismounting when her skirt caught the gear shift and engaged it. The tractor lurched forward. She stumbled and fell into the furrow, the wheel passing over her before the tractor stalled out from lack of throttle. She got up, finished out the rotation, drove up to the house, and put on clean clothes before leaving for the hospital. Her doctor would often reiterate her response when he chastised her for not coming in immediately. "But doctor," she said, "the sod was turning so nice." 5 ribs were cracked, no vitals were punctured, and she was back on the tractor within the week. A deep furrow and loose sandy loam probably saved her life. The complaint that preceded her second trip to the doctor was that of a stomachache. She died in the hospital the next day. Her long-suffering doctor claimed the cause to be that of a blocked bowel. We suspect he was only justifying his envy of an 85-year-old woman who could work in the field all day on a caffeine-laced cup of sugar, a pint of new wine, and enough grease to keep a combine running. A foreign religious order of Catholic priests and brothers had established themselves just a half-mile down the road from Aunt Mary's farm several years prior to her death. Old, widowed, living alone, and Catholic, she soon became the object of their attentions. In the 8 years they wooed her, she was promised enough holy masses, blessed rosaries, and plenary indulgences to have seen Hitler straight through the pearly gates. My only contact with the good fathers occurred one late summer morning when I sought out Aunt Mary to borrow a piece of farm equipment. I found her in the garden on hands and knees digging carrots with a hand trowel. Cloistered about her were 3 young men garbed in flowing brown cassocks, hands folded serenely over protruding bellies, conversing in Italian as they gazed down at her. When I asked why they weren't helping dig the carrots meant for them, Aunt Mary was quick to interject that they could not soil their hands with dirt because they had been consecrated. The fathers smiled indulgently at my ignorance. At her deathbed, one of them droned through extreme unction, the last sacrament. 30 minutes after the sheet was pulled over her face, the old farmhouse was padlocked. The gate up her driveway was chained shut, and a guard was posted at the entrance. When I went to retrieve her old collie, I was told he had run off. Run off? In 12 years, the dog had never been outside Aunt Mary's line fences. The auction was a week later. The farmland is covered in concrete and asphalt now. The tombstone, a monolith inscribed with the eulogy, Walmart. It was my first clue that organized religion was perhaps not entirely about salvation.